Okay.
The first topic you kind of want to talk about is, something kind of ripped from the headlines, we like to call it.
Yep.
Talking about Final Fantasy XIV just did a massive patch, and along with the patch, they changed their terms of service. The one of the changes that's gotten all the attention is that they have changed it so that they strengthen the botting language, the anti-botting language, where they can just basically take action against your account if you're caught botting. And everybody's kind of in a flutter about that because a lot of people use mods to the game to change the appearance,
Which have always been illegal, technically.
which always been well against the rules. Like there's no legal. It's always been against the terms of service. Like to be precise here, because there's no law against using mods in the game, but it is against the terms of service. And for what they'll provide the service to you. So
I've only gotten one reactant.
Yeah, same.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's fine. And so but there is another change to the terms of service that a lot of people kind of didn't pay attention to, which I think is going to be a lot more consequential. Because yeah, like the mods and whatnot and bots have always been against the rules. They just kind of strengthen the language, but they've also changed their policy about GM intervention into player disputes. In the past, what they did is basically they kind of encouraged people to, if you had a problem with someone, they encouraged people to basically kind of take things into their own hands. In that they give a way to blacklist people. Work things out. The explanation they gave is they said in the past they wanted to, they view this as an MMO, and they wanted people to, they didn't want to basically kind of hinder communication between people. The idea being that someone gets mad at you and decides, oh, you're being offensive, so they drag a GM into it. But now essentially, so in the past, the only thing they would take actions for was if you were basically being, direct harassment.
And
if you're being sexist or racist or bigoted in some way and harassing somebody,
right,
then they would take steps. But if you were just like, oh,
being an annoying fuck,
right, if you're just being annoying, they would say, well, blacklist the person, So the problem, of course, is that the problem you run into, and this is really something I had to deal with in Meridian 59, was that the definition of harassment is like really hard to pin down.
Mm-hmm. Well, it could be harassment to one person, could just be messing around or having fun.
Right. Well, exactly. I mean, like you and me. We tend to be very kind of insult friendly to each other. And out of context, it could seem like we hate each other, but like we know we're good friends, so it's not anything to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
But so basically it's one of those things that if somebody's thinking they're being friendly, being a little insulting to to a friend, and the other person takes it the wrong way, well, then you're kind of relying on a fallible human GM to kind of figure out how to separate out what's actual offensive behavior versus what's somewhat a potential misunderstanding.
You put an identified friend or foe tag on everyone, and then they designate.
Right. Whether this is friendly fire or
right.
Right. Well, and like I said, like I had to deal with this a bit in Meridian, where we had a policy that the idea was, we had a fairly hands-off policy, but obviously we didn't want people to harass each other directly, so we kind of had a we know it when we see it type of policy.
Mm-hmm.
When it came to offensive behavior. So the big problem we run into, of course, is that people would try to, um, people would basically, since Meridian 59 is a hardcore PvP game, if they were losing in PvP, then they would turn to administrators as weapons. And so it was like, oh, this person's being mean to me, or this person's harassing me, and people would basically kind of try to skirt the rules to really kind of like try to annoy each other.
Play the game.
Or not even play the game. Basically, like you just like harass someone because they were either as a psychological tactic to shake someone in a war, or just because well I can't fight and defeat this person in the game, so I'm gonna harass them, or like I said,
Trying to fight the war on another level.
Right. And so one of my favorite examples, and this is going to be a little offensive here, so people have been warned.
Trigger warning.
Anybody has sensitive ears here if they're listening to us. Basically, what happened? So somebody mentioned this thing called a baby Jesus butt plug, which is a sexual toy, basically. And it has like a little image of what's supposed to be Jesus in swaddling clothes. Obviously supposed to be very, offensive and sacrilegious. And so people were discussing this back in the, in Meridian, back in the day, and so they would, and some people got offended. So we were like, okay, well, no more. Obviously don't mention that. Like, stop that.
Did you have to make an official post about that on your forums?
Oh yeah. We told people involved, like, you cannot say that anymore. And so what they took to doing is basically using the initials BJBP.
Right.
And then of course trying to argue, well, I'm just saying just letters, like can I get in trouble for saying other different letters? Just being kind of annoying about it. Like trying to skirt the rules as hard as possible. And the kind of the disadvantage here is it basically kind of just ate up time. And like we were a small company, so like this is like our one customer service guy who worked full time, eating up his time, dealing with this stuff, eating up my time that I could have been doing, focusing on development instead. Just really kind of being a real pain in the rump. And but of course the flip side was there was people that were like, just say, oh well, this person's standing in the same room as me. Obviously they're just trying to harass me, being kind of like, like, sorry, no, like, this is part of the gameplay that somebody can stand in the same room as you. And it was just really a big headache. And so like, it's one of those things that I like. It's interesting that they're changing this.
I'm sorry. I'm like sitting here. I'm just like, I'm running the words through my head.
It finally struck you exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
I've been silently laughing for like the past 10 minutes.
That's the maturity level. I mean, it's just one of those things that, to some people this is hilariously funny. To other people this is like, sacrilegious and really, really offensive. Like, so, what do you do? Like as an administrator. And I mean, like, this is the type of thing. And again, like, the customer service people, God bless them, but are not are not the best paid people,
to deal with this shit.
Right. Like, this is just going to be a giant headache for them.
I want to see, like, I just imagine like this happening on like in like Warcraft.
Right.
And like I just want to see the forum post of an admin going, please do not talk about baby Jesus butt plugs anymore.
Right. I mean, yeah, and so like just dealing with that level of, I mean, like, I mean, even if it, you know, I mean, like I said, we had a pretty lax policy, but still, it was like, okay, like, just stop. You're just being a dick here, like, you know.
Right.
It wasn't like we made a forum post. I just kind of talked to like the 5 or 6 people that were doing it and said just knock it off. And so, like I said, then they kind of like they took to using initials, and that kind of became one of the big things that people would do then, using initials for, you know, sensitive topics to avoid. Ooh.
I'm sorry. You should have prepared me for this. I didn't know we were going to go to this place tonight.
Surprise.
I don't even know how I'll edit this for YouTube. I could censor it and just make it so much worse.
Battle.
Oh shit. I'm sorry. I was on my desk. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready for this tonight.
Listen, I told you I had good stories, that this would be a good thing to talk about. You didn't believe me.
Oh, if I get a merch shop, jeez.
And then I'm gonna have PTSD. Great. Because I had to deal with this. Like, that's kind of the annoying part. Is just like, you know, kind of dealing with like essentially children. Like, you know,
me.
And like, you know, and it's, you know, like as an admin, you get it from both sides. You get the people trying to be offensive, and you get the people that are basically just looking for offense.
Right.
And so, like, you know, like having to deal with both sides of this equation,
It
just,
wears
you know,
on you.
Right.
Okay, I'm good. I'm sorry.
I think that's the worst thing. That's the worst thing I've gotten so far. But like, you know, of course we're talking about censorship, and like, you know, sex always comes up in that. So.
The worst part is I think you've told me the story before.
I probably have. Like, you know, your maturity level, you know, it's giggles are fresh.
I know. Oh my god. Like, anyways.
Right. And so, like, you know, like, you know, I do not envy the Square Enix customer service people. And like, the worst part, of course, is probably that, like, you know, this is probably a policy kind of like, you know,
pushed upon
up the
them.
rank.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to be pushed down. Like, and like, you know, the scuttlebutt, you know, from, you know, rumors and whatnot say that, you know, like, you know, Square Enix is not spending lavishly on Final Fantasy XIV, so it's not like they're going to like triple their GM population to deal with the sudden influx of someone, you know, of people going, well, so and so looked at me when I told them not to look at me.
Right. Oh. Sorry, you just reminded me of something from my Makote tribe. Never mind. I'm not telling that story.
Oh God. Okay. Moving on.
So anyway, so I actually have I actually have a story tangentially relevant to what you're talking about. PvP by admin.
Yeah.
It was from PlanetSide. PlanetSide 1. I co-led a small group of players on PlanetSide 1. Our outfit was specialized in what we called Black Ops. What our group called it Black Ops. Other people could have called it other things, but it was basically doing odd tasks to disrupt the enemy teams. Behind the lines. So we go back into the continents that they control, and we disrupt their control.
Where they weren't expecting it, so that they'd be distracted from an attack coming from on the front line.
Right, exactly. So we all called that Black Ops.
Right.
And so we were a very notable group when people saw that we were online, because you could add people without confirmation on your friends list.
See when they're on.
Yeah, so people would just add their enemies on their friends list to know when they're on, and so like the leaders of the enemy teams would add our names to their friends list and know that when all of us are on,
right, expect some
shit's gonna happen. And at one point we were doing some weapon trading with a friend of ours who was on the Vanu Sovereignty. We were on the new conglomerate. And weapon trading, it wasn't against terms of service, but it was frowned upon.
Right.
Because people saw it as a illegitimate means of obtaining enemy weapons.
Right.
And someone that had a grudge against us just happened upon our trading spot and reported us to the GMs.
Right.
Because they're like, oh, I can get them banned. I never have to deal with these fuckers again.
Right. Right.
And the GM contacted us, just like, yeah, this, are you guys doing weapon trades? And I'm like, yeah, so? And just like, yeah, could you guys not?
Right.
And we're like, no. And he's just like, okay. And then left.
Right.
Like, there's nothing you could do about it because we weren't
right,
breaking anything.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and I mean that's just annoying because that takes up a GM's time of someone they could be helping someone with an actual issue about can't get in the game or ran into a bug that screwed them up or whatever. But instead they have to kind of deal with someone's petty bullshit because they can't deal with the person straight up, and so yeah, I just it's just it's very ill-advised. Like if I were anywhere in the Square Enix hierarchy where this was discussed, I would have been like, no, don't.
Right.
Because I mean, if you look at it from a pure business sense, you have to look at what's the cost of people leaving who are upset about this, and what's the how much or more specifically, what's the cost of what you're pouring into this versus the cost of people leaving.
Right.
And which is the better thing to kind of deal with.
My question. Do I want the forma or do I want the Cinder? I want the forma. Is why they're pushing this all of a sudden. Could it be because they're kind of reacting to the sudden surge of outrage culture on the internet? I
mean, that would be my guess. Basically kind of, and maybe they're trying to avoid some kind of PR incident where someone captures screenshots and oh my god, look at this person being transphobic or something like that. Not necessarily being directly insulting, but doing something that they don't like or approve of.
Okay, Dajar just sent us a link to something interesting. The headline is Notorious Eve online player banned for threatening to cut off someone's hands in real life.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing is again, this is like I said, it was already against the rules to harass someone, to be sexist, racist, bigoted, real life threats, that's something you refer to the police department.
Right.
If someone's like, I'm gonna come visit your house and and kill your dog, and it's like, it's time to call the cops on that one. This is not something a GM should get in there. So what we're talking about here, is a lot more of the soft cases, the kind of the corner cases where maybe someone doesn't like, maybe someone for example is virulently anti-Christian and says all Christians are are murderers because of the Crusades or something like that. All of a sudden the Christian then is going to could potentially contact Square Enix Square Enix customer service and take up a GM's time
because they got their feelings hurt over someone's harsh words.
Right. Or somebody arguing a potentially nonsense thing, or or even flip it around. Somebody's hardcore Christian and claims the Wiccans are all evil devil worshiper, baby rapists. So you start getting to a lot of these kind of fuzzy in between stuff that like before is like stuff where before the answer was block them, ignore them, move on. Like and if it's if this is someone in like your free company or something like that, well, if the free company leader isn't getting rid of it, then and that's the other thing too is you start having to kind of deal with because like one of the other things they talked about is like you can't obstruct someone from playing part of the game. Oh, except for like unless it's like some kind of guild rule or free company rule. And so like so you get into things like that, like where maybe the free company has a rule that contravenes this, or or like like say there's a group of like military vets, for example, and somebody joins who's virulently anti war. And like, oh my God, all these people talk about is killing and murder and and all this stuff. It's like, well, you joined a group that advertised itself as veterans,
right?
A group of military veterans. What did you expect them to talk about? So it just, it's kind of a terrible policy. Like I think this is gonna cause a lot more problems than it's gonna be worth. And of course the problem now is that if Square Enix 2 months from now goes, yeah, we made a mistake, we're not going to do that, well, outrage culture and all that stuff is going to be like, oh, well, they don't care about protecting minorities and
their players and
right. I mean, this is just this is just kind of a PR. I mean, I think like either way they were going to have one way they're going to have a potential PR problem, the other way they're going to have basically spend a lot of money and have a much greater PR problem if they decide to cut costs.
Right. And the other thing, I mean, okay, from my personal experience, how to put this, I have a friend, okay, plays on a different server than me, who will use the GMs to get his way for certain things, and say because he's been notoriously hated on the server he plays on for things that he's never done, and so he became the things that people accuse him of doing just to spite them for accusing him of doing them.
I think you were talking about this, like he'd pull hunts early and stuff like that.
Well, that's just it. I mean, I didn't want to get into specifics, but
right.
One day he got. We'll have to send this to him, Pumpkin. One day he got accused of pulling a hunt mob early, and hunt mobs are world bosses that spawn once every 3 to 6 hours. And so people try to make trains to hit them every time they're up.
Right.
And
the rewards can, everybody who participates can get a reward.
Exactly. And so he got accused of pulling a mob early before the train had fully formed for it, which is it's a taboo thing. Like you do that and you get put on the wall of shame. Everyone knows it.
Right, because the essentially people that could have benefited from that were in transit did not
have time to get there. Yeah.
Right.
And so he gets accused of doing this while he's asleep and not logged in the game. And I was there for that. Like, I was there, and they're like, this guy pulled early. I'm like,
bullshit.
Checks friends list, checks Discord. No.
Right.
And so like I should start sending him messages for him to see when he wakes up about it. And he just wakes up and is just like, oh, those fuckers.
Right.
And like, so he never actually pulled early. He not even spitefully, he never did it. But what we do is we'd go out and blame him whenever he wasn't on. And like he'd show up and he's like, what you gonna do now, bitches?
Right.
And like even to the and this happened like 3 years ago, and he's still known.
He still gets crap about it, huh?
Yeah, and it's so weird, and it never happened. So like he has a chip on his shoulder, and like all sorts of different stuff. He's a hardcore raider, so
Right,
he
right.
he deals with all sorts of people's personalities. People get butthurt because he won't carry them through raids, and his raid group won't carry them through raids.
Right.
And he just and so people started reporting him for shit because he'd hurt their feelings because he doesn't sugarcoat anything.
Right, right.
So people get butt hurt from his attitude. Yeah, I heard about that, Pumpkin. We can actually talk about that in a little bit. Maybe we'll talk about that at the end of the podcast. The new data center stuff.
Oh yeah.
Um,
That's exciting.
yeah. So he started getting reported because people were getting butt hurt at him because he'd hurt their feelings because he wouldn't carry them because they just wanted free passes through life.
And he already had kind of that bad reputation because
Right.
people were already kind of bad mouthing him because he had that reputation for being
this horrible person that doesn't care about the community. Yeah.
right.
And so he got fed up with it, and he just started reporting people.
Right.
For reporting him or for getting on his nerves or just annoying him. Like he just stopped caring about you just stopped caring. And this is my interpretation, not just throwing that out there. But he's a great guy. I love him. He's one of my favorite people.
But you can only get kicked all down so often to...
Right, and like he turned reporting to GMs into a science.
Right.
And at one point, go ahead.
He knew the keywords to use to escalate it and make
them
pay attention.
Yeah, like he reported enough people that he figured out what buzzwords to use with the admins.
Right.
And like I had to report someone that I had a bad role playing experience with that got really, really started stepping over lines with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to him and I'm just like, hey, I need to report this person. What words do I need to use?
Right. How do I make sure this doesn't get blown off? Right.
And
so that's kind of the problem you're going to run into is that people are going to try to invite me again. But that's the problem you're going to run into is that people will will kind of learn what's going to be acceptable.
Right, and then it just turns into a whole like puzzle game, meta puzzle game in itself.
Right, and of course, like there's the infamous he said she said type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh well, this person is rude and well, but they said this. Well, but they said this before that, and well that started when we did this, and trying to kind of like unveil who's he said she said thing.
Oops, shit.
Because like what's potentially going to happen is that eventually both people might get penalized or whatnot. And there's always kind of the problem you have with death by 1,000 paper cuts. People, for example, on the autistic spectrum, who people kind of view as potentially creepy or potentially upsetting or whatever. They just get reported enough times. It's like, well, this person seems like a troublemaker. It's like, well, no, it's people. People read their behavior the wrong way.
Yeah, you can't interpret tone through text. So like if you have someone that's kind of on the autistic spectrum and you're speaking with them and you're reading their face, face to face, like you can tell,
Right. But even then, like some people can don't know how to deal with people on the spectrum.
Right. I mean, it's hard. It's really hard for everybody involved.
Right. Oops, my browser crashed. I had the Twitch thing.
Oh.
Oh.
Okay. Do you have anything else you want to say on the admin stuff?
Yeah, I just like I said, this just seems like it's going to be a giant mess for
Right.
For Square Enix to kind of deal with. And I mean, I can see why, because like in the official wording, basically said, like I said, they said in the past that that they wanted to before they wanted to kind of like let people kind of they were afraid of hindering player-to-player communication. But they said that basically they felt like the things had changed since then, and so they were going to they basically were changing policy. Again, like you said, this is potentially kind of in response to outrage culture and people kind of getting angry at other people for perceived slights. So but I think that the original policy was the best, where like if you're, and because I mean this is the other problem that they talk about, is like they talk about like if someone's offended, well I can be offended by just about anything. I can be offended by you breathing. That doesn't mean that I'm in the right and that you should stop breathing.
That doesn't mean that it is offensive.
Right. And so it's I think like there's a careful balance here where you have if somebody says, hey, that's offensive, like within reason, you shouldn't be going around doing it. But like again, like this gets into a whole lot of like really fuzzy, indistinct stuff that like suddenly, and now a person making probably barely above minimum wage, maybe not even not even part of American culture, depending on where they if they outsource their customer service or not, trying to make human judgment about if this is offensive or not
with people that they've never met before.
Right.
And like this like offense in general. I mean, this can kind of tie in with censorship too, to be honest.
Right.
Because I mean, what is censorship but trying to avoid offense? But
well, trying to avoid something that's going to cause a problem.
Right.
Whether that's avoiding somebody being offended, avoiding legal repercussions.
But offense is one of the aspects of being sentient beings. That's one of our biggest issues as human beings throughout history, is taking offense to each other.
Right. And sometimes that offense be turning into something lethal.
Right.
And so then you just get people who are going to use this, and people, and I mean just one quick kind of personal story is I've run into some people that have just been really kind of crappy to me in the game. Like people who profess to be good friends, and then all of a sudden they decide they don't like the look of my face, and then basically just kind of like really kind of tell me to fuck off in the strongest possible way for whatever reason.
Right.
And so like I can imagine like them someone who has that attitude playing up the friendship thing, like saying, oh hey, start being a little teasing, start getting a little back and forth banter, and then all of a sudden turning to the GM and say, oh my god, look what they said to me.
Right.
And so it just becomes this, like you said, this giant game puzzle type thing that where really no one wins. But
I have a slightly relevant story, just interacting with GMs in general from Star Wars Galaxies. I think I've told it before, but one time I was in a really toxic guild at one point, and they loaned me a weapon to use to run endgame stuff with them, but my interpretation was that they were giving it to me.
Right.
Their interpretation was that they were loaning it to me, but they never
Right.
said we want it back.
Right. Right.
And then the game updated, and they made it so that weapons, and they changed the statting system in the game, like a major overhaul. And so one of the updates for it was that weapons could be remade by weaponsmiths to have the new statting system, but it would link the weapon to the character. It'd make it a character bound.
Right. Right.
And so I gave it back to them, like, hey, could you, upgrade the weapon for me?
Right.
Because their main was, the guild leader's main was a weaponsmith, or one of them was a weaponsmith, and they're like, yeah, sure, we'll do it. And then, like, we had this sudden falling out.
Right. And you're like, hey, where's my weapon? And they're like, what do you mean your weapon?
Yeah, exactly. And so I contacted GM, being like, hey, I had this falling out with this group. I gave my weapon to the weaponsmith to make it, but they're not giving it back. And it was a horrible system to start with, having to give items to another player.
Right.
And like after I sent that ticket, the guild leader sent me a message basically telling me to get fucked. Like that was the title of, because the game had in-game email.
Right.
And like the subject of the message was "get fucked," and then just calling me a piece of shit and
right
this, that, and the other. And apparently the GM during his investigation opened my in-game mail.
Right, and it was like, there you go.
And he's just like, hey, who's this person? I'm like, that's the guild leader of the guild that I just left.
Right.
And he's just like, oh, okay. And he got banned.
Nice.
I didn't even bring that up to the GM because it was after I sent the ticket in.
Right.
And so like his own just assholery got himself banned.
Right. I mean, and that's kind of a case where it worked out because obviously there's kind of someone who was obviously kind of a bad actor, but if assuming like it had been kind of a okay, but assuming it had been
another opportunity to extract will appear soon.
that was odd.
What just happened?
I don't know. I think maybe the one guy got some lag and because he had no relic equipped, and then all of a sudden he had a relic equipped.
Right.
And the countdown restarted. But say the person had been reasonable instead, or semi-reasonable, and it had been like a legitimate, difference of opinion.
Right.
They thought they were loaning you the weapon. You thought they were giving you the weapon. They had the weapon at the time. Yeah, like who's in the right there?
Right.
I mean, setting aside our friendship, for a moment, as a GM, I'd look at you as a person, and, what's the likelihood that this is a misunderstanding, and then trying to kind of step in the middle of such a misunderstanding.
Right.
Assuming you were both, decent people, that contribute to the community positively, well, I'm going to end up pissing off, one person or the other, depending on who ends up with the item.
Right.
Like, this is not
an easy situation.
Right. The best answer is to be like, we do not, adjudicate these things. You guys work it out.
Right.
And then neither one, you might feel a little cheesed off that, well, this person took the weapon, but you're not going to be blaming the game developer for this.
Right.
You're going to be blaming the other person. Whereas, if they took a side, if they had to kind of adjudicate things and they took a side and said, well, no, it really belongs to them, then you're going to be like, well, that person and the game developer backed them up, stole this nice weapon I thought was mine.
Right. Which I think might have been through the process. I think I did have emails being where I was contacting the weaponsmith about it. Being like, hey, can you make this weapon for me? This new BioLink weapon, and they're like, yes, I can. I think that was part of our context. I don't remember. It's
Right. It was a long time ago, but yeah, I mean, but this is the problem, of course, is that, also that, these things can seem very important in the heat of the moment,
Right.
but a couple of years later, it might not matter. And so yeah, people will get very kind of heated and passionate in the middle of the things. And
Yeah.
like this is the nature of people as well, where some people will just some people just kind of fly off the handle and then have to kind of take a step back and go, sorry about that.
Oh yeah, and the whole reason why they were pissed at me was because I'd been trying out the medic class and they were using me as a healer, and like I was a teenager at the time. I'm just like, I'm not feeling it, because I was just using it just to complete one quest where medic was one of the classes that could solo that quest. But then I had to save up credits to do a class change again.
Right. So you're medic for a while. They were relying on you for essentially raid composition, and then
yeah.
You changed back, and they got salty about it. Huh?
Right. And these were people that I was skilled with. I knew some of them for 5 years.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it was just kind of like, oh, okay, I don't matter to you. Okay.
Right.
Because I changed to spy. Which was widely considered a PvP only class, but I had figured out how to play it for PvE.
Right.
There was a very specific build and talent build that you could use to make it a PvE class, and it did pretty decent damage. You just had to have a build to keep swapping in and out of stealth constantly, so that you could keep using your Alpha Strike.
Right.
And they're like, oh no, we can't take you into raids. You're a spy. Spies are useless in raids. I'm like, I'll show you.
Right.
And,
but it's people following the meta and whatnot. So.
Right. But yeah, that's that story.